The sound of rolling suitcases echoed down the carpeted aisle. But inside the glittering first-class cabin of Aurelia Airways, a moment that seemed trivial was about to become a storm that would shake the world. Seat 2A. The velvet soft leather seat, bathed in golden light like a silent throne, already belonged to someone. Yet within minutes, it would turn into a battlefield. Anthony Reid, 42, tall and steady, sat composed. A tablet rested in his hands, his finger gliding across the screen as if time itself slowed around him. He did not need to flaunt. The calm in his eyes carried a quiet confidence that was undeniable. The cabin door opened. Catherine Whitmore, 49, entered as if the entire cabin were her stage. Her blonde hair tied neatly, her diamond-studded watch glittering. Every step radiated an invisible signal of power. Walking alongside her was Laura Mitchell, 33, a flight attendant with a strained smile, a smile not of service but of command. "Excuse me, sir," Laura's voice rang out, sweet but laced with arrogance. "This seat has been reserved for another VIP member. I'm afraid you will need to move." The air froze. A few passengers looked up, their fingers pausing on their phones. At first glance, it seemed like a small error, but Catherine's cold gaze, paired with Laura's tense breathing, revealed something darker. This was not a system error. This was power demanding a seat. Anthony looked up. His face betrayed no emotion, no flicker of anger, only a stillness carved in stone. Calmly, he drew out a leather wallet and produced a platinum membership card along with a boarding pass clearly marked Seat 2A. His voice was low and firm. "This is the seat on my ticket. I am also a platinum member." Laura glanced quickly, her lips tightening, then shifted her gaze to Catherine. In that brief exchange, the two women sealed an unspoken pact. Power requires no justification. Catherine smirked, her voice slicing like a blade. "This seat has always been mine. It belongs to me." The words landed like an invisible slap across the cabin. A few phones tilted, cameras quietly recording. Red lights blinked. Anthony remained silent for a moment. He held the boarding pass out again, the cabin lights catching the print. Seat 2A. His voice was slow, steady, each word striking like a hammer. "This is my seat. I will remain here." The cabin held its breath. This was no longer about a seat. It was a confrontation between arrogance and dignity. Laura swallowed hard, struggling to regain a professional tone. "Sir, this seat is usually reserved for our most loyal passengers. Mrs. Whitmore has flown this route for many years." The word loyalty lingered in the air, but everyone understood its real meaning. Belonging. Catherine belonged. Anthony did not. Catherine stepped forward, her designer bag brushing her side, her diamond-studded watch ticking loudly as if to remind the world that time and this seat belonged only to her. "This seat has practically always been mine," she scoffed, her laugh dripping with challenge. Anthony adjusted his tie, his eyes locked on Laura. His voice was steel. "This seat was assigned to me. I will not leave." The cabin cracked with tension. All eyes darted between three faces, Catherine with her pride, Laura with her unease, and Anthony with a calm as unshakable as stone. Some passengers whispered, "He has the ticket." This is clearly discrimination. Catherine laughed loudly, theatrically. "Ridiculous! To quarrel over a first-class seat. Absurd." But this time, the whispers were no longer hidden. A few shook their heads, phones raised higher. The injustice was exposed. Laura tried one last time. "Sir, I must insist." Anthony cut her off, his words sharp as a blade. "Do not repeat yourself, Pete. I will not leave." The words were not loud, yet they shook the cabin. It was not anger. It was the unyielding calm that pressed the air heavy with silence. No one in that first-class cabin knew that the man they dismissed was not an ordinary passenger, not someone unworthy, as Catherine believed. In that silence, as the tiny red lights blinked from recording phones, as Catherine thought she had asserted her privilege, a devastating truth remained hidden. Anthony Reid was the owner of a multi-billion-dollar technology empire, and in just minutes, Seat 2A would no longer be the center of attention. The entire Aurelia Airways would bow before the storm they had just unleashed. The hum of the air conditioning merged with the muffled whispers, the entire first-class cabin hanging by a single taut string, ready to snap at the slightest pull. Anthony Reid sat motionless, his hands firm on the armrests. His posture was not defensive, but that of a commander seated in the heart of a battlefield, unshaken. Flight attendant Laura Mitchell gripped her service tray so tightly her fingertips turned white. Her thoughts spiraled. Why would this man not yield? Catherine had flown this route for 10 years, a big spender, generous with tips. And him? Just an ordinary name, unknown to anyone. Catherine Whitmore stepped forward, her figure casting a shadow across the cabin's golden light. Her voice was steady, sweet, but laced with thorns. "You can sit anywhere else, but Seat 2A does not belong to you." A woman in row 3 shook her head, whispering to her husband, "His ticket clearly says 2A. Why are they forcing him?" The quiet clicks of phone cameras began, sharp and deliberate. Red recording lights blinked like secret eyes, capturing every second. Anthony lifted his gaze to Catherine. In his eyes there was no fear, only a cold and resolute determination. He held out his ticket once more, the cabin lights reflecting off the bold print. Seat 2A. His voice resonated low and steady. "Tickets do not lie. I will not leave." A wave of murmurs swept through the cabin. A young man muttered, "This isn't about a seat anymore. This is blatant discrimination." Catherine laughed, a brittle sound like breaking glass. "Clinging to that seat won't make you a VIP. Don't embarrass yourself." Laura tried to step in, her voice trembling but straining to remain professional. "Mr. Reid, Mrs. Whitmore is a loyal customer of many years. We prioritize." Anthony cut her off, his words sharp as steel. "Priority does not mean stealing another person's legal right." In that moment, the cabin ceased to be first class. It became a courtroom, with every passenger's eyes serving as the jury. Laura swallowed hard, her heart pounding. But in her ears, Catherine's unspoken command rang clear. "Handle it. Do not let me lose face." Anthony sat steady, his back straight like a pillar, his gaze piercing through every falsehood in the air. His life had been filled with witnessing injustice wrapped in the disguise of rules. He did not need to shout. His unwavering silence alone unsettled his opponents. A derisive laugh cut through Catherine again, her diamond-studded watch catching the light as she deliberately spoke to the cabin, loud enough for all to hear. "Ridiculous! A single seat, and he thinks it makes him important." This time the reaction shifted. A middle-aged woman leaned toward her companion, whispering, "Who does she think she is? That man has every right to his seat." In that instant, the tide turned. The harder Catherine tried to assert herself, the more her arrogance stood exposed, and the more the cameras turned toward her, not Anthony. Laura drew a deep breath. She knew what came next. If she did not call a superior, the situation would spiral out of control. With trembling fingers, she lifted the intercom. The drama had long surpassed a seat dispute. It was about to become a tidal wave that would engulf the entire airline. Anthony closed his eyes briefly. Inside his chest, his heartbeat was steady, like a countdown. He was no longer just a passenger holding his seat. He was the spark set to ignite the system. Catherine smiled, convinced she had already won. Laura trembled, believing she had maintained order. But Anthony knew the truth. In just minutes, the world would know exactly who he was. The crackle of the intercom filled the air as the curtain to the cabin trembled. Then a large figure stepped inside, his broad shoulders blotting out the golden glow of the lights. Brian Turner, cabin supervisor, 56, with silver hair slicked back and black shoes polished to a mirror shine, did not need a microphone. His voice alone carried across the cabin. "Sir, I am ordering you to vacate seat 2A immediately." The atmosphere tightened. Dozens of phones recording zoomed in closer. Every passenger held their breath. Anthony looked up, closing his tablet. The motion was calm, yet final, like a drumbeat calling battle to order. His voice was deep and steady. "Reason." Brian raised an eyebrow and gestured toward Catherine. "This seat belongs to our VIP passenger." The words landed heavy, like a cabin door slamming shut. Several passengers exhaled in outrage. A man in row 3 burst out, "But his ticket clearly says 2A. You are lying in front of everyone." Brian kept his cold expression, though the corner of his mouth twitched. Catherine smiled triumphantly, reclining as if already declared the victor. Anthony tilted his head slightly, eyes fixed on Brian. He spoke each word slowly, sharply. "I have shown my membership card. I have handed over my ticket. This seat was assigned to me. I will not leave." For a brief moment, the stern mask on Brian's face cracked. He cleared his throat, trying to recover his authority. But Anthony's calm defiance made that imposed power feel fragile. Catherine cut in, her voice shrill and calculated so all could hear. "My God, we are here to fly, not to argue with someone who doesn't know his place. I have never been treated so poorly." Instead of sympathy, angry stares turned toward her. A young passenger shook his head and whispered to his friend, "That woman is the one causing trouble, not him." Anthony lowered his voice, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You can repeat your order as many times as you like. My answer will not change." First class held its breath. Every word he spoke, short and unyielding, carved into the silence. Laura Mitchell stood against the wall, her heart racing. She thought of the tips Catherine had once given staff, the lavish dinners she boasted about. She knew siding with either one meant choosing her own future, yet in her mind another voice whispered, "The cameras are recording everything." Catherine stepped closer, her shadow falling across Anthony's legs. "You are pathetic. Why cling so desperately to a single seat in first class?" Anthony turned his face, meeting her eyes. His voice dropped low, resonant like thunder rolling through every chest in the cabin. "This is not about a seat. This is about fairness." The words reverberated across the cabin, tightening hearts. No one saw him as just a passenger anymore. There was something in his presence that hinted he was far more. Brian inhaled deeply, masking his unease. He turned, yanked the curtain aside, and said flatly, I will call the captain." The hiss of the curtain cutting through the air felt like a blade, and everyone knew the real storm had only just begun. The curtain snapped open. Footsteps struck firmly against the thick carpet. Captain Richard Hayes, 52, in a crisp, striped uniform with 4 golden bars gleaming on his shoulders, entered like a judge ready to deliver a verdict. Once a symbol of safety, in this moment he carried only a chilling sense of unease. At his side stood Brian Turner and Laura Mitchell, 3 figures forming a wall in front of C2A. Every eye in the cabin locked onto them. Phones were raised higher, lenses trained forward, red recording lights flickering like hundreds of witnesses. "Sir," Hayes's voice rang out, deep, commanding, more decree than dialogue. "The crew has full authority to reassign seats. I order you to vacate this one immediately." The silence exploded in its own weight. Every heartbeat could be heard. Anthony Reid looked up, his gaze locking onto the captain's, unwavering, unflinching. He spoke slowly, each word cut sharp as a blade. "My ticket clearly states 2A. I am a platinum member. I have violated no rule. Therefore, I will not leave." His words landed like hammer strikes against the facade of authority. Hayes narrowed his eyes, his hand tightening around the captain's cap. "This is your final warning. If you do not comply, I will call security. You will be escorted off this aircraft." A gasp rippled through the cabin. A female passenger whispered loud enough for multiple phones to capture. "He bought the seat. How dare they force him out?" Anthony leaned back, his hands resting firmly on his knees. He did not shout, he did not tremble. Just one sentence, short, steel strong. "I am not going anywhere." The first-class cabin erupted in protest. Voices rose. "This is unfair. We are recording all of this." Catherine Whitmore sat with arms folded, lips curled into a mocking smile. She deliberately raised her glass of champagne, her voice sharp and shrill. "We cannot delay an entire flight over one stubborn man. Ridiculous." But this time, the backlash did not fall on Anthony. It came crashing down on her. A male passenger shot back firmly. "No, the one being ridiculous here is you." Laura Mitchell felt her hands trembling. In her pocket, the cash Catherine had slipped her still burned hot. She knew every eye was watching, every camera capturing. If the truth came out, her career would end. Hayes glanced at Brian, then gave a subtle nod. Brian understood, pulling the curtain aside, signaling for security. The air collapsed as if before a storm. Passengers leaned forward. Phones lifted higher. Everyone knew this was no longer about a seat. It was a battle between false authority and true dignity. Anthony closed his eyes briefly. He heard Catherine's ticking watch, Laura's ragged breath, Hayes' heavy footsteps. When he opened them, his gaze burned like a torch in the dark. In that moment, one truth remained unknown to the cabin. The man they were forcing, the one dismissed as unworthy of seat 2A, was in fact the CEO holding a $4.2 billion contract, a verdict that could decide the life or death of Aurelia Airways. And in just a few minutes, they would realize they had chosen the wrong man to humiliate. The curtain was yanked open. 2 figures in deep blue uniforms stepped in, black shoes striking the carpet with a rhythm as heavy as a funeral drum. Daniel Brooks and Miguel Alvarez, airport security officers, advanced like moving walls. Their leather gloves tightened, their cold eyes swept across the cabin. First class turned suffocating. Phones rose higher, red recording lights flashing like warning beacons. Brooks stopped directly in front of Anthony, his voice low and dry. "Sir, we were called to escort you off this aircraft. Please stand." Anthony looked up. His face carried not a trace of fear. His voice rose steady and calm, unsettling in its composure. "For what reason? What law have I broken?" Miguel glanced at Brian Turner, then dropped his gaze as if avoiding the weight of the question. Brooks gripped the rim of his cap, his tone frosty. "You are accused of refusing to comply with crew instructions." A sharp exhale came from the back row. Then a man's voice rang out. "He is right. This is blatant discrimination." Murmurs swelled into a wave. A woman lifted her phone high and called out, "We are recording everything." Catherine Whitmore leaned back and let out a bitter laugh. She sipped her champagne, her shrill voice deliberately carrying across the cabin. "Goodness, how much longer must we waste on a man who does not know his place? Take him off. We have a flight to catch." But her laughter drew no agreement. Angry eyes began to turn toward her. Anthony closed his tablet and slid it carefully into his leather bag. He rose, every movement slow and deliberate, dignified as though performing a solemn ritual. His shoulders were straight, his head held high. He did not resist. He did not bow. The two security officers flanked him, one to the left, one to the right. Their marching steps thundered like a funeral procession. The cabin was silent, broken only by the pounding of hearts heard between held breaths. A passenger cried out, almost in despair, "They are really forcing him off. My God, this is history unfolding." Anthony walked down the aisle. Each step struck the carpet with a chilling cadence. He did not glance around, yet no one could tear their eyes from him. In his gaze there was no humiliation, only the calm resolve of a man holding invisible power. Behind him, Catherine slid triumphantly into seat 2A, as if reclaiming a throne. She raised her champagne, smiling with pride. At last, peace. But she did not know. That peace would last only a few fleeting breaths. Outside, as the cabin door closed behind Anthony Reid, a storm had begun. And it was powerful enough to drown the entire empire of Aurelia Airways. The cabin door slammed shut behind him. The corridor leading to the international terminal glowed with pale white light, its reflection falling across Anthony Reid's face. But it was not the light of humiliation. It was the light of truth awakened. He walked on, each step echoing in silence, flanked by two security officers as though he were a criminal being escorted. Yet his face bore no trace of surrender. His eyes were deep, burning bright, as if determined to record every second of this moment and forge it into a weapon. When he reached the concourse, Anthony stopped. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly to send a short message to his COO. They just chose the wrong man. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, and a breath he had held broke free, carrying with it the weight of memory. The streets of Detroit in winter came rushing back, snow piled high on sagging rooftops, wind howling through shattered windows. He saw again his father, a large man with calloused hand that trembled after 12-hour shifts at the steel mill. He heard the words his father repeated over and over, his voice roughened by factory smoke. "You must learn to stand tall, even when the world tries to force you to bend." Anthony was only 16 when his world collapsed. That night the phone rang in their cramped apartment. His mother crumpled to the floor, her sobs tearing through the silence. His father had been killed in a robbery on the way home. At the graveside, the boy's small hand clutching his mother's frail fingers, Anthony swore an oath. "I will build something that forces the world to see us as human beings first." From that day on, he buried himself in discarded computers salvaged from a church basement. unscrewing every bolt, learning every line of code from borrowed library books. While other kids played games, he wrote programs predicting basketball scores, searching for order in chaos. He washed dishes, worked night shifts in warehouses, repaired cheap computers to save every dollar for his dream of college. Hundreds of times he was rejected, stared at with suspicion for his skin and his name. But Anthony remembered his father's words, "Stand tall." And in the end, in a small room with a desk cobbled together from wooden crates, he founded Reid Technologies. Today, that company had grown into a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. And bitterly, it was Aurelia Airways, the very airline that had just humiliated him, that was clinging to life, waiting on a $4.2 billion deal from his firm to survive. Anthony stood motionless under the terminal lights, his breath heavy, his eyes blazing. They thought they had shamed a passenger. In truth, they had rekindled the fire of a boy once standing at his father's grave, vowing never to bow his head. He whispered softly, only for himself, "They think they took a seat, but the truth is, they just lost a future." Just minutes after Anthony Reid stepped off the plane, the first-class cabin erupted into a stage lit by dozens of phones. Tiny red recording lights flickered like fireflies in the night, but each one carried the power to destroy an empire. A young passenger whispered to his friend as he uploaded a clip to Twitter. "Unbelievable, they kicked out a man with a valid ticket just to give the seat to her." The tweet, tagged with Seat 2A, was shared thousands of times within minutes. On Instagram, 30-second clips circulated showing Catherine slipping cash into flight attendant Laura's hand, Brian barking orders, Captain Hayes issuing cold threats. Every detail was magnified, replayed again and again. Anthony's firm declaration, "I will not leave," became the quote set to pounding background music, spreading like wildfire. Within an hour, the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack shot to the #1 spot worldwide. Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube flooded with the footage. Comments poured in like a storm. "He clearly had a ticket. This is blatant discrimination. And if even a billionaire is treated this way, what chance do ordinary people have?" In the VIP lounge of the airport, Anthony sat in silence. His phone buzzed non-stop, hundreds of notifications lighting up the screen. Videos of him being escorted out step by step were now covering the world. He did not need to say another word. The truth was speaking for itself. Back in Seat 2A, Catherine Whitmore lounged in comfort, still unaware that the world outside was already calling her the symbol of shameless privilege. Laura Mitchell clenched her uniform pocket, feeling the searing heat of the banknotes hidden inside, evidence that had been captured from multiple angles. Brian Turner still believed he had followed procedure, unaware that his harsh voice had become an audio clip ridiculed across the internet. At Aurelia Airways headquarters, a giant screen in the media room kept flashing. Views, 5 million, 8 million, 12 million. A young staffer, pale as paper, whispered, "The clip is spreading faster than any press release we could write." The storm was no longer just outrage. It was becoming a movement. People plastered Anthony's words across images and shared them everywhere. Tickets don't lie. Dignity is not up for exchange. Anthony sat there, eyes fixed on the runway, his heart steady. He knew that from the moment the first clip was posted, this was no longer the story of one passenger forced out of a seat. It was the story of millions who had once been forced to bow their heads. And this time, he would not allow it to be buried like so many times before. In the dim light of the lounge, Anthony gave a faint nod. The fire within him was ablaze, and this time, the storm of social media was the weapon he needed to rip the mask off Aurelia Airways. The 36-story glass tower of Aurelia Airways, once gleaming like a proud symbol, now looked more like a fortress under siege. On the 18th floor, the communications room was in chaos. Keyboards clattering, phones ringing non-stop. On the massive screen, flashing numbers kept climbing. CTOA clip, 25 million views, 32 million, 40 million. A young PR associate, lips trembling, reported, "International outlets have picked it up, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera." Every headline reads, "Aurelia Airways forces black passenger to give up seat for white VIP." The room felt drained of air. The communications director buried his face in his hands, voice thick with dread. "God, this isn't just a viral clip. This is a tsunami." Upstairs, the boardroom was packed. A giant screen displayed a blood-red graph. Aurelia stock plummeting, down 8% in just one morning. The CFO roared, his face flushed crimson. "Another hour of this, and we'll lose $1 billion in market value." One executive tried to interject. "We need a press release immediately. Emphasize our commitment to diversity. Promise an internal investigation. Maybe fire a few staff." "Useless!" The chairman slammed his hand on the table, the crack like a gunshot. "The video is too clear. Everyone saw it. The flight attendant taking cash, the supervisor shouting, the captain threatening removal. We have no room left to explain." A moment of silence crushed the room. Then a side screen lit up with new words. "Passenger removed. CEO Anthony Reid. Reid Technologies." The room exploded as if a bomb had gone off. Cups toppled, papers scattered. The chief executive stammered, his voice trembling. He's the CEO of Reid Technologies? My God, we're in the middle of negotiating a $4.2 billion contract with them." The CFO's face turned ashen. He collapsed into his chair, breath ragged. "It's over. There's nothing left to save." Meanwhile, in the PR office, phones burned hot. Strategic partners flooded in with emails, reconsidering cooperation. Fashion houses and beverage brands that once advertised on Aurelia flights announced their withdrawal. Even veteran pilots publicly tweeted, "We will not put our names behind a racist airline. Seat UA." Chaos spread like wildfire. Shouts, slammed desks, muffled sobs merged into a dirge of collapse. And through it all, the cold truth emerged. Aurelia had not only lost a passenger, they had lost the one man who could have saved them from the edge of bankruptcy. In the top floor office, the CEO of Aurelia sat motionless, eyes locked on the replay of Anthony Reid being escorted out. His words echoed across the cabin, now cutting straight into the company's heart like a blade. "The issue is not a seat. The issue is justice." In a quiet conference room at a hotel near the airport, Anthony Reid sat silently in front of the camera. No bright backdrop, no stage lights, only his face and his voice ringing steady and resolute. The media team of Reid Technologies held their breath. This was not just another video. This was the final blow. Anthony looked directly into the lens, his voice deep and measured, each word striking like a hammer against molten steel. "I purchased a first-class ticket. I presented my membership card. I followed every rule, yet they told me I was not worthy of C2A." He paused, his eyes burning, piercing through the lens, as if staring straight into the hearts of millions. "Let me be clear. Dignity is not for sale. Not mine, not anyone's." The team behind the camera shivered. This part would remain untouched. No edits. Anthony drew a deep breath, then dropped the bombshell. As of this moment, Reid Technologies is terminating all negotiations with Aurelia Airways. The $4.2 billion contract no longer exists. In addition, we are filing suit against Aurelia for discriminatory practices. A moment of silence. Then came his closing words, not as a threat, but as a verdict. This is not just my story. This is the story of everyone who has ever been forced to bow their head. I will not allow silence to protect injustice for one more second. 15 minutes after the video was posted, Twitter erupted. The hashtag #DignityIsNotForSale shot straight to #1 worldwide. International networks replayed the clip on a loop, calling it the $4.2 billion bomb. At Aurelia's headquarters, the boardroom fell into stunned silence. Executives stared at each other, faces pale. A marketing director whispered with trembling voice, He just strangled us with a single video." An in-house lawyer stammered, "We have to beg, we have to call him back, we have to negotiate." But the CEO of Aurelia cut him off, eyes hollow, voice hoarse. "No, he has made his decision. This is no longer a deal. This is a sentence." Aurelia's stock continued to plunge like a stone hurled into an abyss. Analysts reported, one of the largest aviation technology deals of the century collapsed in an instant. Outside, public outrage roared. Clips of Catherine handing cash to a flight attendant, of Brian barking orders, of Hayes coldly threatening removal played again and again. Yet the most shared video remained the moment Anthony stood tall as he was escorted out, his head high, his words echoing, "The issue is not a seat. The issue is justice." In the small conference room, Emily Carter, COO of Reid Technologies, looked at Anthony, her eyes filled with admiration and disbelief. "You just turned humiliation into the sharpest weapon." Anthony did not smile. He gave only a slight nod, his voice low and cutting like a blade through the air. "They thought they had taken a seat. In truth, I just took away their entire future." Headquarters of Aurelia Airways, 27th floor, the boardroom. Gone was the usual air of authority. Instead, the atmosphere was heavy, suffocating, like ash. On the giant screen, the clip replayed for the 10th time. Catherine Whitmore slipping cash into Laura Mitchell's hand, Laura shoving it into her pocket, Brian Turner bending down to shout. And finally, Captain Richard Hayes standing tall, voice sharp as steel. "This is your final warning." "Play it again," ordered a board member, voice cold as ice. Laura Mitchell sat with her head bowed, hands twisted until her knuckles bled. She whispered through tears, I didn't mean to. She always tipped big. I just didn't want trouble." The HR director slammed the table, voice seething. "Didn't want trouble? The whole world just saw you take a bribe mid-flight. One action of yours has burned our entire reputation to the ground." Laura broke into sobs, but her crying drowned in the dreadful silence. The screen shifted. Brian Turner, face twisted with anger as he leaned into Anthony Reid, voice booming. "If you don't leave this seat, we will call security." Brian tried to stand firm, his voice cracking. I was just following procedure. If passengers argue the flight is delayed, I had to maintain discipline." A female executive slammed her pen down, eyes blazing. "What procedure allows you to disregard a valid ticket? What procedure lets you declare a passenger unworthy? You didn't maintain discipline, you created chaos. You are suspended immediately. Termination papers will be signed within 24 hours. The screen jumped again. Captain Hayes, voice as hard as iron. "You must leave this seat immediately." Hayes still tried to appear confident. "I am the captain. I must stand with my crew, otherwise unity collapses." A chilling voice cut through from the head of the table. "Blind unity cost us $4.2 billion. You didn't protect your crew. You dragged this airline into the abyss." Hayes's face drained of color. One final, cutting declaration rang out. "You are permanently barred from the aviation industry." The room sank into eerie silence. But the deadliest blow did not fall on Aurelia's staff. It landed squarely on Catherine Whitmore. Her name filled the screen. "Whitmore Cosmetics terminates contract. Luxury brands boycott. Customers call for total boycott." The image of Catherine raising a champagne glass in seat 2A, smirking as Anthony was escorted out, was plastered across international front pages. Beneath it, the chilling caption, "The face of shameless privilege." A board member shook his head bitterly. "She wasn't our employee, but she dragged us all into hell." No one argued, because it was true. Late that night, Aurelia released a statement, firing Laura Mitchell, Brian Turner, Richard Hayes, promising comprehensive reforms, retraining in diversity and equity. But the public did not believe it. Headlines screamed, "Aurelia acts not out of conscience, but out of fear of losing everything." Outside, stock prices continued to plunge. Major partners pulled contracts. The name Aurelia was no longer tied to luxury, but had become synonymous with prejudice and corruption. In his glass-walled office high above the city, Anthony Reid quietly watched the news replay on television. He did not smile, nor revel in triumph. His voice was low, steady. They thought they closed a door. In truth, they opened a courtroom for the entire world. And in the stillness of the night, he knew this was only the beginning. Looking back at the entire story, we realize what was taken away was never just a seat. It was a symbol of how society still measures human dignity by skin color, status, or invisible standards. But Anthony Reid's story shows us a simple yet piercing truth. Real power does not lie in a first-class ticket, nor in the hands of those holding privilege. Real power lies in the ability to stand tall, to keep one's dignity even when the entire system tries to force you to bow down. From an expert's perspective, this was not merely a brand crisis. It was a turning point for the global service industry. A reminder that in the digital age, a single tap on a phone camera can turn truth into a movement and injustice into a revolution. Any organization that continues to operate with prejudice will not only lose customers, they will lose trust, the most valuable asset in business. If you believe that dignity is not for sale, hit like to spread this message and subscribe so you don't miss other stories about justice and the power of resilience. And before you leave, drop a comment with the phrase, "Stand tall," to affirm that wherever we are, human dignity must always come first.